Good afternoon. We're so glad you could join us for this month's Faith in the City session. I'm Sylvia Oberly. I'm a member of the planning team here at Knollwood Baptist Church. As you know, Faith in the City is held on the first Tuesday of the month, September through May. So this is our last meeting until the fall. So we're looking forward to a good discussion today with our guests and those of you on the call. And so we thank you for your continued interest and support of Faith in the City through the year. In just a few minutes, I will introduce our guests, but first I want to start with a reminder of a few housekeeping matters. First, as you know, we do record each of our sessions so that we can share with others not able to attend. To ensure that we have the best quality recording, we ask that you keep your audio on mute throughout the initial presentations. As you have questions, please put them in the chat function and we will be checking on those and we'll do our best to address them during our discussion. Our recordings and other information are posted on our Faith in the City Facebook page and on the Knollwood Baptist website. Information about joining our Facebook group is also available in the chat and will be throughout our meeting. We do hope that you will take a few minutes to join our Facebook group after today's meeting if you haven't already. This will be an important way that we can stay in touch and share vital information during the summer. Our topic today is voter education and advocacy for equitable education in our schools. We believe this is an extremely important time to be having this discussion. The primary election is on May 17th, 2 weeks from today, and early voting has already started. In Forsyth County, as elsewhere in the state, there is heightened interest in educational issues. Locally in school board races, more candidates than we've seen in a long, long time. Our county commission race and statewide in legislative races as the Leandro case continues to be a key priority. Today, we are pleased to have with us Renee Seckel and Susan Book with Save Our Schools in Raleigh. Renee and Susan are parent advocates who have personally committed much time, energy, and effort to ensuring equity and fully funding in our schools. They have worked with Every Child NC to develop its advocacy toolkit, particularly the sections dedicated to voter education. And together they hold workshops and seminars to explore key questions and issues to be aware of in making important voting choices. We also have with us Reverend Suzanne Parker Miller, no stranger to Faith in the City, as she has been a very steady participant each month. She's Executive Director of Pastors for North Carolina Children, which is also based in Raleigh. We really appreciate the way in which she has supported us and also encouraged many people across the state to join our monthly meetings. A Moravian minister, Suzanne has experience in advocating for education and equity through the years, and that has led her to found Pastors for NC Children in 2019. She will talk to us about Mission Amplify, which is an initiative that invites congregations and community groups across North Carolina to join in writing letters to state legislators throughout the year to ask for full enactment of the Leandro Plan and support for public education statewide. So please join me in welcoming all of our guests today. We'll start with Renee and Susan.
Hello, and thank you so much for inviting us to be here. We're delighted to be here to present. I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see the slideshow? Just give me a thumbs up. So yeah, Susan and I are both stay-at-home moms in Cary, and we are passionate about public education. And one of the things that we do is try to educate folks about how they can pick out good pro-public school candidates. And so we're going to go get started really quick because there's a lot to cover and not that much time. And yeah, hang on one second. All right.
There we go. All right. I'm Susan Book. Hello. So the first thing that you need to know about voting pro public education is who in the world is on your ballot. And that might seem really simple, but considering all the redistricting that we've all gone through and how many times, I don't know, our maps may have changed, it may not be as simple as you think. So it's important to know who's on your ballot. Okay, And I am going to share my screen if I can. Hold on. Why is it not? Oops, hold on.
And the slideshow will go right back up in a second.
Yeah. Hold on. There it is. All right. So first thing you're going to do is look yourself up, right? You can look yourself up in the voter rolls. And it's really easy. You're just going to say, I want to do voter lookup. Boom. And you're going to be led to the North Carolina State Board of Election site. And right on there is how to look up yourself. And I'm going to look up myself real quick just so you guys can see. I am the only Susan Book in the voter rolls, so it's kind of easy for me to do. And you need your name, your first name, last name, and your county. If you have a very common name, you might want to fill out the rest, but I do not have a common name. And there I am. And there's a whole bunch of information. This is really important right here. These are all your jurisdictions, what your precinct is, your congressional district, all of that is right there in case you ever forget. And it's easy to forget, especially when it comes to this Superior Court new digital stuff. We tend to not remember where we're at. But down in the bottom is your sample ballot. And there it is. So this is what your ballot is going to look like. And so you can already start doing your research from there. Renee?
Yep. Hang on one. I'm sure there's a more seamless way to do this, but I don't know it.
All right. And oh yes, that's me again. So the first thing that we like to look at is foundational qualifications. And we mean foundational, which means this is for any candidate, not just educational candidate. These are things to look out for when you're rating a candidate that we think are really important. And the first one is my pet peeve of all things. I like people who know their office. It's really one of those things that just, as me as a voter, that's what I want to look at. So I'm looking for someone who knows the office that they're running for and knows the powers of that office. So for example, a couple years ago, I'm watching TV. I'm watching Wheel of Fortune because that's what I do in the evenings. And there's a whole bunch of TV ads and one pops up and it is a candidate for North Carolina General Assembly touting how they're going to end redistricting in our school districts. Well, wait a minute. Is that the power of the North Carolina General Assembly? Even for our General Assembly, that's a really big overreach. That might be a position someone might take for a school board, but for a General Assembly member, I don't think this person knows the office they're running for. So I'm not going to vote for that person. That's just kind of something foundational. Record of public service is another really good one. Now, this is where incumbents are always going to have the advantage because we get to, or well, some of them a disadvantage, but we get to look up their voting record, right? We can look up on the General Assembly page, sometimes they'll have bills filed under their name. So we can look up if they filed a bill that we like or dislike. So you can look up their record of public service. One thing that I like to remind people of is some of our people applying for those candidacies for those lower offices in city council and even our school board, make sure they're actually voting in their municipal elections. You know, that little voter tool, you can use that, look other people up, just saying. And under there, they'll have whether they voted in a primary or not. So if they're running for office, but not a very good voter, something to look at. And so one of the other questions are, do they address education specifically? Do they talk about education as a candidate? There are roles like county commissioners where, yes, they're handling a multitude of issues, right? They're handling affordable housing, they're handling healthcare and other things. Do they address education specifically? Because they really, really should if they're changing our property taxes to fund our education system. Sure, absolutely. So do they actually talk about education specifically? Community engagement. This is starred on our little thing for a reason. So you're going to hear a lot of people bragging about how much community engagement they have. We've got a lot of Cub Scout leaders. We're going to see a lot of PTA presidents, but I'm going to ask all of you to think about that critically, right? If that's the only community engagement that they've had, maybe that's not exactly what we're looking for. Because I've seen some PTA presidents that really haven't done community engagement. They've done fundraisers maybe, but maybe community engagement isn't something they've really dived deep into. So it's something good. It's positive in their favor. Absolutely. But it's not the end all be all of being a candidate. So that's why it started. We love community engagement. Woohoo. But make sure that there are other good points in their favor, not just being a PTA leader. And let's see, I was going to say one other thing, and because it was brought up before this, check out who they hang out with, right? Who, not just endorsements, but who they hang out with, right? Who are their friends? Who are they taking pictures with? Just saying, that's another just overall, not just educational, but in general, who are their friends? Who are they friends with? It's just another question to start asking.
And then there are also the more general, but also specific to education qualifications that we want. And this is where, our ideological bent as presenters is very clear. We believe in public schools. We believe in equity. That means every kid in a school gets what they need to succeed in school. So we are looking for candidates who also support those same things. So you want them to at least acknowledge the fact that in North Carolina, there are inequities in our public school systems and be willing to address them with clear eyes. We want them to provide examples of what they would actually do. And this is where PTA training comes in handy. If any of you have been on the PTA, you quickly learn you don't complain about something unless you are ready to fix it and say how and why you're going to fix it. So you want somebody who's going to talk about what specifically they mean when they say they support education, or what specifically they're going to do if you decide to grant them the power of the office they're seeking. And the third thing is you want to look out for, and this is becoming more and more common, rhetoric and code words. For example, we're seeing a lot of fewer politicians right now, but here where we are, we see a lot of children first, or we're for the children, when the groups are standing for policies that are not good for children, or they only support a very small sliver of certain kinds of children, or worse, they fight for policies that would grant parents dominion over children in pretty much every way, even when it would be harmful to those kids. We see a lot of code words about choice. Choice sounds like a great thing, and sometimes it can be, but when choice is used in education, it is often used to suggest privatization of schools, giving public funds to private schools. So that's something to watch out for. And then there is our one big, I will speak about it quickly, hugest pet peeve to watch out for that Susan and I will never stop talking about, and that is our favorite. We are spending more on education than we ever have before. That is something that politicians, particularly here in North Carolina, really like to say because it elides a truth, which is that we're not spending enough on public education. So, I always say to somebody, if you're hearing a politician say this and you start thinking, oh, that sounds good, go on over to Harris Teeter, fill your cart with food, try to get $100 worth of food, and then go up to the checkout and offer them $50 and say, well, I only spent $40 last week, so you should give me this $100 of food for $50 and see where that gets you. Spending more when the spending itself is still not adequate doesn't really mean much of anything. And similarly, you'll look for floating statistics. We increased education spending by X and such. Well, that's wonderful, but how much does it need to be increased? You have to look at the minimums and what's actually necessary, and not just give into vague rhetoric about, well, we're doing more than we did before. So,
okay.
Yep.
So we developed a kind of system, a way of looking at candidates' websites and the information they put out to the public. We call it red light, green light system, and it's pretty much how you might think of it. A green light candidate website shows a thoughtful understanding of education issues that supports for our public schools and includes ideas to improve schools. It's robust, right? We know from their website or their social media or whatever they're putting out to the public, we know immediately how they're going to vote for public education. There's no wiggle room. And we like those candidates. Those are our green light candidates. A yellow light is a candidate's website alone doesn't give you the info you need or whatever else they're putting out to the public. And you have to do more research because they're not forthcoming with their actual own words. And this is incredible. We've noticed that this has increased because the prevailing, trend, if you will, on websites and on social media is to be as brief as possible, which is fantastic to some extent. But that means that we've seen candidates who used to have huge platforms on their website, like put it down to 3 sentences. And we're a little disappointed in this trend because it makes it harder to actually rate those candidates. And then there's the red light candidates. And it displays one or more indications they do not support public schools. And it's really relevant. It's easy to spot on any of their social media and on their website.
And before we move on to the next slide, I just want to add one thing, which is, first off, we understand that running for office is a big leap and it's big and brave, and neither one of us is running for office. So we certainly don't mean to slam any candidate. But one thing I did notice while doing the research for this presentation is how many candidates out there do not have a web page, do not have social media accounts where they talk about stuff. If you Google them, almost no information comes up. And so if that is happening to you, if you're finding that your candidates just don't have a presence anywhere online, you have to ask, do they not want you to know what it is that they think? Do they don't think it's not important to put their views out there? You just want to, we'll get into digging deeper and doing more research, but it starts a question in your head of how serious is this person about representing you if they're not willing to spend the time and sometimes the money, although Facebook is free, Twitter is free, but if they're not willing to put any time or effort into letting people know their positions, that might be a reason not to vote for them. So moving on, we've put together some examples of what we consider to be green light, yellow light, and red light candidates for you.
Okay, so let's start with the first green light candidate. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but yes, they do mention their community engagement as a PTA leader. They recognized a child deserves a world-class education, specifically in North Carolina, from pre-K to high school. And then they go on to specifics on what they plan to do with that ideal, which is they need to increase teacher pay, restore pay scales that reward teachers for advanced degrees. They talk about per pupil spending in the buildings. We need to provide students the resources to support social emotional learning through increased funding for school counselors and social workers, very concrete things that they plan to do. I also believe that all publicly funded schools should be on a level playing field. So there we go. We're talking about equity again. For years, the current majority of the General Assembly has allowed tax dollars to flow to unaccountable charter schools and voucher programs. That's not right. So I think what we're saying here is this person has a plan. They clearly have an education plan and ideology that is transparent. And that makes them a green light candidate.
Our second green light candidate is a school board candidate, and this represents excerpts from their website. It's not the entire thing. They actually have a lot of information. But one of the reasons I chose this one specifically is note in the second start point that they talk about their PTA experience, which, as we've noted, is not in itself a qualification. But the way they do it here is they connect it specifically to a part of their platform, that their experience in the PTA helps them in school board because it specifically informs their opinions on what should be happening in schools. So in this case, I actually think that works. That's a good qualification. But she also talks, this candidate also talks very specifically about what they would want to do as a school board candidate. They talk about increasing pay of classified staff. That is something a school board member can do with help from the relevant county commissioners. You know, everybody is working with the same restraints on General Assembly funding, but counties can ask their commissioners to help provide more funding for salaries if they want to. I'm talking again about recruiting staff and keeping them in their public school system. And I also appreciated that they recognize an equity issue in targeting more educators of color, because we know research has shown that when we have educators of color, their students thrive. So this is a green light candidate for the specificity, and because they're very clear in choosing things that they could actually do or support as a school board member. Next, we have a yellow light candidate. And we have the benefit of knowing who these people are. And I try to choose from across the spectrum and across the county, the state. But this is a sitting member of the General Assembly. And this is an excerpt, but the substance of what they have to say about schools. So this is someone with the power to introduce laws, but they say that what they're going to do is listen to parents, spend time in the classroom, and communicate with parents. They do not provide a plan for how they would put into action whatever it is they learn. It's a little peculiar for them to say that they're going to spend time in a classroom. I'm not sure what that means. As an observer, are they going to be a substitute teacher? And how does that square with their job as a member of the General Assembly? So there's no immediate red flags here, but this is not somebody who you can go, okay, I feel good about this candidate. You are going to have to do a lot more work to figure out where they stand in support for public schools.
This is a yellow light candidate for the Board of Commissioners. And one of the issues with this one is the candidate seems to have some good values, but more info is definitely needed. If you look on other parts of their website includes a 7-paragraph biography of the candidate, but only about 5 paragraphs, what could be loosely and generously described as issues. So they don't really seem to have a very robust platform. And you definitely need more information on what their values are and their platform is going to be for a Board of Commissioner. So I don't know how they feel about property taxes. No idea from this.
Although I will note that at least we're very, very glad to see them recognizing equity.
Yes.
And this is yellow trending towards green. So chartreuse, this is a chartreuse candidate. So I certainly don't want to be too negative, but we wanted to put something in there that's promising, but not quite there yet. And now we have our red lights. And before Susan starts on this slide, I just want to note that we've talked about specificity before, but specificity alone will not get you there. This particular candidate, their website is pages and pages and pages of information, but none of it's good.
Correct. And some of their pages actually are direct attack on their opponent, which I don't have, it's okay to, as a candidate, to talk about perhaps the differences between you and your opponent, but perhaps attack pages seem a little much. So they're going to bring back parental access to classrooms, right? So you're going to see a lot of parental rights being used in, they're against forced mandates. This one is interesting, the fact that they're actually touting vouchers on a county level. That should scare us. They're actually going to take our tax dollars and give vouchers on a county level. And as you know, vouchers have no accountability for our tax dollars at all. So they're not only, looking at school choice, but they're going to micro manage this into our county level. And the last one is, full disclosure, I have a kid on the spectrum. I care deeply about disability rights. So when I saw this on their page, I almost laughed aloud. It says, I will hold schools accountable for denying legal required services, work with the North Carolina to more equitably fund SPED. Okay, that's fine. Give local schools and teachers power to make decisions for their special needs students with parental consent. I don't know what that last sentence means, and I do a lot in IDEA, right? This is mumbo jumbo, other than, yes, we need to fund SPED. Okay, other than that, most of this, no, that's not a school board, what a school board member can do. That's a mess. And we should call them out on the mess that they just spewed all over their page.
Yeah, particularly when you see a candidate for a local office talking about what seems to be giving local schools and teachers power to make decisions that are dictated by federal law. So is he saying that he's going to give local schools the power to repudiate federal law or break federal law?
And
I'm not
and just
sure.
in case if you've seen this, we've also seen we need to not have any federal dollars from the Department of Education. If you ever see that, that's a huge red flag. Those federal dollars pay for Title I, our poorest students. They pay for our disability students. Anybody who wants to end funding from our federal government for education is going to definitely hurt our most vulnerable students. So watch out for that.
All right, we have one more slide left. We just have 2 more candidates. The top one is, that is it. That is the entirety of that candidate's platform for education. And it's concerning for 2 reasons, not the least of which is right on its face, they're talking about school choice, which is not something that a board of commission candidate has anything in any power to control. So what I hear is this candidate, if the school board comes and says, we need this kind of money to retain teachers or maintain our school buildings, I see this candidate possibly saying, no, thank you. Let's just wait until the General Assembly provides vouchers and get the kids out of public school. This is not somebody who is taking their job as a, oh, good gravy, that switched. Pardon me. Taking their job as a county commissioner seriously. And then the last one is for the state legislature. By now you're going to see where my red flags are, right? No 2 students are the same and the options given to them shouldn't be one size fits all. Okay, that's not in itself bad, but there we go. Increased choice and flexibility. Once again, this is a sitting legislator. This is somebody who already could make our schools better, but is going instead to, let's pull money from the public schools and put it in private schools instead, which is problematic for us. And I will note that this particular candidate also sits on a committee at the legislature whose charge is to reimagine public schooling from the ground up. But on his website, this is what he says matters to him in education, is providing vouchers. So that's very, very concerning.
Okay, so you've got a yellow light candidate and you're like, what do I do with them? Okay, well, it's time to do a little research, and we all have our nice cell phones and our internet, so get to work. And we have neighbors. So first of all, social media, find them if they are actually available to look up on Facebook or Twitter. Some candidates are more chatty than others, so you do like the ones that are maybe they may turn into a red light candidate, but at least you know what they stand for. Endorsements. And you can tell a lot. And I will say, and I'll give a big shout out to our teachers and our educators right here. The North Carolina Educators Association is a wonderful place to look. These, they're great. They know pro-education candidates. They know what to look for, and look for their endorsements, because that, if you see an apple card, grab it. That's going to be a good way to find these candidates. If you're on the fence, they've done their research. I can guarantee it. I mentioned this before. If sitting legislator has links to their voting histories, look that up. Find out if they've, filed that bill on Leandro, and if they have, then we know that they're great, right? They've filed that bill. They've been a co-sponsor for that bill. That means they're a fantastic candidate. I don't know how else to say it. So this is, yeah. So have they sponsored Leandro? Candidate forums, go to them. They're fun. A lot of times they're recorded, so don't worry about the time. If you've got League of Women Voters, search up their stuff. A lot of times these things are recorded, so you don't have to actually be there in person and or in that timeline. And the last thing is who's giving them money. This is a lot harder. I'm not actually very good at this, but sometimes you can find things like on their advertisements, who's paid for something, and pay attention to that. And so I think we're about ready to take questions. If you wanted the longer version of this, we do have a podcast called Advocacy Bites, and we did a whole episode on this where we weren't as rushed. So if you want to hear more about that, check it out. I think Suzanne actually put it already in the chat. So thank you, Suzanne.
My name's Diane Lipset. I'm another member of the planning team, and I get to help moderate the question period. Sometimes during presentations, people pop a lot of questions into the chat. That hasn't been the case so much today as we've been listening and absorbing information. So I'd like to invite anyone listening to use the chat to write out a question if that's more comfortable, but also feel free to unmute and simply speak your question. Susan and Renee, I want to thank you for the work you did to tailor this presentation so specifically to where we are in the state, to have different kinds of candidates for different kinds of audiences, but to bring to us the people who are making statements and then will be on our ballots when we look ourselves up as voters and figure out what our ballot will look like. Extremely helpful in that way. Questions from anyone? I'll pause for a minute in case someone would like to voice one. More information in the chat, a background for some of these, Renee?
Oh, I was just gonna, it occurs to me, if y'all are familiar with the Public Schools Forum, they also had an extensive candidate questionnaire, and I'll try to find a link while we're talking and put a link to that in the chat as well, because they're a nice nonpartisan, to the best of my understanding, site, and that will tell you something, both who answers their questionnaire and the way that they answer the questionnaire. It's a good way to find information.
And also it's those kind of questions are good and handy to have if you actually attend a forum and you want to ask a very good education-based question. You can't think of one on the fly. Sometimes it's nice to have an organization like that having done the homework for you.
Do you have 2 or 3 favorite candidate questions that you would have ready to go at a forum?
That's a good question. I like to ask them directly about funding and just put my question to them. Do they believe that our schools are underfunded, and how would they remedy that problem? I think that's one of my favorites because there's not a ton of wiggle room on it. Try not to give them any wiggle room if you can. So I asked them if our schools are underfunded and how they would remedy it. Generally, I try to just kind of form my questions based on what they've said during their open remarks. So if they say parental rights, I want to know what parental rights we don't have right now. I'd like to know that, because right now we actually have a ton of parental rights. So I'm curious to know if we need more parental rights, what in the world that means, because what parental rights don't we have? I'm curious because I have a ton of parental rights.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat. Generally, how clear/obvious are candidates about their positions regarding Leandro? They're pretty clear. And particularly if you ask the question in a way, do you support the court's right to enforce compliance with the Leandro plan? That's going to tell you right quick, because we have the leadership of the General Assembly who will say no, that it is only the General Assembly's right to decide whether or not children should get a sound basic education, and that the court may not intervene. So, even if they're squiffy on funding levels or, oh, well, we think funding is fine, if you ask them, do they specifically support the court's right to enforce the Leandro plan, their answer or refusal to answer should be instructive.
When you encounter websites marked by brevity, right, where there's, I don't want you to ask you to mind read, but are there different explanations? Is some of that theory of what communication on a website should look like potentially, and other times a kind of lack of specificity that?
Oh, one candidate we looked, I'd say 2 years ago, and they had a huge page devoted to their education platform. And now it's just this little panel. So obviously their design of their website has changed. From what I know of this specific candidate, their views on education have not. So I noticed a specific visual change to their website from previously, a previous version. So that was one of those interesting kind of moments where I would have, used them we have used them as a green light candidate before, and suddenly they're now in the yellow light category, not based on their actual policies, but based on what they're presenting to the public, because it looks prettier.
And I would add to that, for candidates for school board or for town council, or, well, we haven't talked about town council because they're by and large not dealing with education, but for these small local, particularly in more rural counties, like they might not feel a need to. They might feel like they're getting in touch with their voters on a face-to-face basis and can answer those questions there. There's a lot to consider when running for office. It can be overwhelming. So I'm inclined to be kind to candidates who are particularly first-time candidates running in a small office. That's just, they might not have gotten to it yet, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be trying to answer questions.
Yeah, thank you. So there may be more questions that come to mind, but we're going to turn at this point to our second guest and second presentation, Suzanne Miller, to talk to us about Mission Amplify.
Can you all hear me now and see my presentation? I hope so. It's really nice to be with you all. I'm glad to be here today. Thank you for the invitation. And I will be sharing my PowerPoint afterwards, so Sylvia can send it out in the emails. I wanted to just quickly in the chat, if you all would take just a moment for me and put a number in the chat to represent how familiar you are with the Leandro Court case. We've mentioned it, we've talked about it. I know it's been presented here at previous Faith in the Cities. If you would, 1, meaning you've never heard the word other than today, you don't know what it means. 5, being you're ready to do a presentation about it, you could teach others about it. So I'm just always curious to see where the audience is, and just to have a general idea. So I'm going to keep moving, assuming that most of you, and I'm seeing lots of 3s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, so that's great. Just as a quick reminder, Leandro is the court case that began in 1994 when 5 low-wealth counties in North Carolina sued the state saying they weren't providing the constitutionally mandated sound basic education for all children. That sound basic education, if you can see my mouse here, is this yellow line that we require to have that minimum standard of education. We're not talking world class. We're not talking best. We're talking bare minimum. And the green line here is on the left is where we currently are. So we are fighting tooth and nail to get up this little ramp here to be able to get our kids to the bare minimum. And that's really, really important to remember. This is not a pie in the sky dream. This is minimum. So one of the things that I love about the way the Leandro case has been talked about, the comprehensive remedial plan and so on, is that it focuses specifically on the 6 most vulnerable groups of children. It focuses and will help every child in the state, but specifically, it's important that we're focusing on the most vulnerable kids. Those are the pre-K kids, the children who are subject to racial discrimination, our Black, Hispanic, Latinx, Indigenous children, our children with special with disabilities, whether those are physical, emotional, or learning disabilities, our students who are coming from low wealth or poor families. They have economic, disadvantages that are generational typically and systemic. Also our families who are our children who are living in rural areas. And then lastly, but certainly they're not ranked, but those who are learning English, our English language learners. So just to remind you all about Forsyth County specifically, since I know Faith in the City is based in Forsyth, and I'm a graduate of Forsyth County schools, Forsyth County, Winston-Salem, Forsyth County public school system. Forsyth is looking at a 31% increase in funding. If we can get the Leandro Comprehensive Remedial Plan funded, your district would have 31% increase in funding just to get you to the bare minimum amount of funding. That's what the courts have said must happen. That looks like approximately 422 additional teachers. I honestly am not sure where they're going to find those teachers right now, which is a huge other side note concern, because there are just not enough teachers, but it would pay for more. Also looking at early education, the pre-K funding for Forsyth County, you would be looking at about a 440% increase in pre-K funding. That is significant. I don't need to tell anybody that that is a lot more children that are going to be better served and better prepared to enter kindergarten. So what do we do about this? This is what I'm really here to talk about. And there's two things we can do. Well, there's three, but the first two are looking at the micro level. What can we do in our local communities that will help our local children? One is that we can get these candidates that Renee and Susan were talking about, we can get them on the record with where they stand. That is super important to know. You know, maybe it's not on their website, and maybe you see them in a candidate forum, or you're able to see them in the community somewhere. Ask them directly where they stand on Leandro. If you can get it in video, or you know, in the newspaper or something else where you get them to be on record, that's even better, because then that allows us to be able to hold them accountable, whether they're candidates or current elected officials. But knowing where they stand is so very important. Secondly, at a local level, you can ask your local leaders to pass the local resolution that the Every Child in Sea Coalition has put together. There's a link to it, and I'll put the links in the chat in just a second. But it is already written out for you. All you do is substitute your, local county and date information in it, and it says that they, as local leaders, are supportive of the Leandro plan. I also will say it doesn't just have to be elected officials in these situations. You can have your PTAs at your schools pass it. Our PTA passed it as a board, because it's an educational opportunity as much as anything to let people know about why this really matters. Those are micro level things you can do. On a more macro level, on a state level, we have developed at Pastors for North Carolina Children. I've spent the last year developing a program called Mission Amplify. It's our first big initiative, and it is basically a letter writing campaign that is helping us organize the state to support public schools. It is calling from the prophetic tradition of writing letters, the prophets. We have lots of examples in scripture of speaking truth to power. And so that is what we are looking to do. We're addressing these letters to our state legislators who have the power to make the changes. We want to speak from personal experiences. They'll be we want them handwritten so that they garner more attention. And quantity is important. It's hard to ignore postcards when they start coming in large quantities. Here's some pictures of some that my actual congregation in the Wake County area wrote a while back. We have the postcards to provide for you. We have all the training and materials. I have booklets here. You can see in my picture, packets to put together. It's a postcard party in a bag. We also have a training manual that we go through at a training session, which I'll talk about in just a second. But we provide you with the materials for your congregation group or your community group to be able to write. What is the hope for outcome? What is the overarching goal of our program? It's that children have what they need to flourish, that they have what they need to thrive. We know from research that one of the best ways to get children out of poverty is to educate them. We also know that ending poverty would increase and support education tremendously. They go hand in hand. So we really need to make sure that children have what they need to succeed. So like I said, we are building teams across the state who are writing postcards 6 times during the year. about different topics within Leandro. The goal that we have is to get groups writing to all 120 House reps and all 50 senators so that we're covering all 100 counties in the state. And if we can do that, having a 10-person team writing to each one of those folks, we're looking at about 14,000 letters, 14,400 letters a year. That's going to get noticed at the legislature. This is not going to happen in the first year of our program, but this is the goal because we know we're looking at long-term advocacy. And what are our smaller goals? We want to provide an opportunity for folks who have never done advocacy before to dip their toes in safely in a way that they can begin to engage with these issues. This can be super overwhelming. Most people are not willing to follow Susan Book around the legislature like a lost puppy dog, like I did my first time, and go down to the legislature and learn how to advocate. It's scary. I was nervous about it, and I would not have done it if I didn't have friends to take me and show me how to do it. And I think most of us are like that. So we want to provide a simple, easy way to do it from your home or your church where you can write. Thanks, Susan. She'll take you anytime, anyone. She's a great teacher. She and Renee both. I've followed both of them around the legislature before. But we want to provide a way to just start and do something. We also, this is a huge piece of it. We want people to understand what the issues are. We know that people need to be able to understand what's happening. And this is a way we can teach you. As an organization, this is a way we're identifying folks who are willing to take an action and be able to know who to then ask to maybe make phone calls or meet with legislators or come to Raleigh for an advocacy day. But we don't start there. Like I said, it's inviting folks into further advocacy. We want to step people along in ways that are comfortable for them to be able to get involved further. We know that legislators listen to you when they know who you are better. We know that those relationships are important. We want you to know who your legislators are and for them to know you. So they do work for you as your legislators. And we want them to know that we're watching, that we are paying attention and we are not letting them get away with things in the dark or passing bills. It's not okay that they're passing bills at 3 a.m. so that nobody's paying attention. Those things are not okay, which does happen. There's strength in numbers. Being able to work together makes this better. And it's a lot more fun to be able to do advocacy with your friends. Grab cups of coffee and sit around the table and write, or your other favorite beverage, whatever you choose, to be able to gather around and take 10-15 minutes to write some letters. It's not complicated. Lastly, but most importantly, we want informed voters. And this ties right back into what Renee and Susan said. We want you to know everybody on the ballot, where they stand and why their positions are important for public education. I'm very guilty of going in and voting it in previous times. Oh, I just like their name. I like their name. Oh, I don't know what this person does. It's a court judge. And now I'm all of a sudden going, oh my goodness, the judge positions are hugely important. All the different levels of government are hugely important for education. So we really want to make sure people are paying attention and voting pro public education. If you have a group that would be interested in potentially participating in Mission Amplify, you can hold your phone up to the screen right now and your QR code will take, if you hold your camera up, that'll take you right to our website. I also will drop the link in the chat and give that to you in just a second. But here's some upcoming dates we have for trainings. It's an hour. It's any training you want to come to. They're all the exact same. They're 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the number of questions. And I go through exactly how to do this in your congregation, in your Kiwanis group or your Rotary Club. I mean, we would love to participate in any group. We are faith-based as an organization, but Mission Amplify can be done by any group. The devotional piece that we include is that it's very optional. It's not a required piece of the process. And so how can you help? I have the link here. I'll drop in with our newsletter. You can sign up for that for updates. You know, do you know of groups who might be interested that you can put in touch with me? And also we're continuing to look for funding. You know, we are grant funded from the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation currently, along with some individual donors. And so we're always looking to be able to expand our program and provide resources. We don't want any group to not participate because of cost. You know, but we also know a lot of churches have mission funding and things that they could help us with. So all of those things I will include here in a link in just a minute in the chat. My information is here. And so if you have questions, you can reach out, and I'll stop talking with that.
Thanks very much, Suzanne. Both your presentation and this initiative are clear, accessible, focused pathways into doing something and then perhaps doing more. Questions for Suzanne Miller or Renee? Would you care to voice some of the back and forth that went on in the chat in case that's not accessible to everyone?
We were just talking about in the Leandro case, as many of you know, Judge Lee had been presiding over the case for several years now. And just last month, gosh, the days run together, but this year he was removed from the case summarily, and the judge, it was assigned to a different judge. And somebody had asked in the chat, was there any reasoning given for the removal? And the short answer is no. Judge Newby is our Chief Justice, and he has the right to remove a justice or a judge from any case if he wants to. And so he did. He did not provide a rationale that I'm aware of. I have not seen any reporting. I have not seen any commentary from him. He just decided that he could. And so he did.
Thank you. Yeah. Other questions for Renee and Susan, or for Suzanne, particularly about the Mission Amplify project, or about Leandro and other statewide educational equity issues that we all want to follow Susan Book around the legislature now, by the way.
Diane, I have a question. This is Sylvia.
Yes, please.
Suzanne, is there a cost for groups to participate in Mission Amplify?
We have done the math so that there is a suggested donation for groups to be able to help offset our costs. But no, there's no direct requirement for materials. I'll also say I will mail out the first set of materials to any group that wants to participate and comes through the training, including the notebook. And then everything is also downloadable. So if groups want to just download the materials themselves, that's available. We do have bulk. I have thousands of postcards I've ordered in bulk. And we would love for groups to specifically use our postcards, but that's also super inexpensive. But that way there's a continuity of the look of the postcards coming in, but it's also not required. If anybody wants to use notebook paper, you can do that. You know, we want it to be accessible and easy for groups to participate in. And we want to make it fit with whatever your group capacity is. I have churches who have 2 or 3 on the team who are writing. I have one church that's doing 75 people, each time. We have over 300 already signed up, 300 people, about 15 congregations that have already signed up in just our first initial launch.
Great. Any ballpark figure of that donation amount, just so people can be thinking about that? I know it sounds like it varies, but. And as Suzanne's looking at that, one other thing I know looking at the people who are participating in this session today, there are a number of people who have been part of forums already held in Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. So if you have any links that you can put in the chat to share with others, YouTubes or videos of forums that have already been held for candidates, so that we can maybe go back and look at what Renee and Susan have provided for us today and do some of that research ourselves. So please let us know, and please share the information. That's a good use of the chat here in these few minutes.
for suggested donations, I have, whether you have 10 people, 20 people, or 50 people participating, and whether we provide the postage for you, which we do at cost for postcard stamps. So it can range anywhere from $1 for 20 postcards for one session up to, if you were doing 50 people for the full year, including postage, you're looking at about $450. But that's, obviously a large church versus a small church, and whether we give you the post, we get the postage at the post office for you. So
it sounds like you're making it as easy and accessible as possible.
We are, and we're not making money off of the supplies. I wanted to really, I know church budgets are always, tight. We don't want to make that a piece that, it would prevent someone from participating.
Okay. Anything else that anyone would like to share or questions? One of the things we've tried to do at Faith in the City is be mindful and respectful of your time. So we're close to that 1 o'clock hour, but I would just echo what Suzanne Eppermanis has put in the chat here, that this presentation has been extremely helpful, accessible, compelling, and action oriented. And that was really our intention really throughout the year, but our intention to end this year on what we hope was a very strong advocacy and action oriented note. Our overall theme was for the year was building support for public education now. And we wanted to underline and bold and underscore that now. And I think we have, not only in our local elections coming up and statewide elections coming up, but also in the ongoing Leandro case and some of this work that you've shared with us today, we have specific things that we can do. So hopefully you have taken that from our presentation today, and we'll leave the chat open to for just a few more minutes so you can share some of that. But we truly, yeah, Suzanne, you have one more thing?
One more opportunity to hear a little bit more about the biblical call to social justice and supporting our children. David Rockefeller, who's on the call, and myself will be two of the presenters tonight at 7 for the United Methodist Congregations for Children. And while focused on United Methodist, if you join in, we're not going to kick someone out who's not Methodist, but it's going to be about an hour presentation this evening live, and we'd be glad to have you join. I put the link in.
Great. Thank you so much. We certainly are open to anyone and everyone who has information to share with us. So thanks for that. And please continue to share information. I just want to say thank you to Renee, Susan, and to Suzanne for being so helpful today, and also for being so supportive of this work on a statewide basis, supportive of our efforts here at Faith in the City. We just try to open the doors and open the doors for dialogue. And we really appreciate, this is the ending of our 4th year. I think when we started this, we thought, we might do this for a year, or we might focus on education for a year. Here we are 4 years later, and we also made the decision recently to keep at it in education for another year, because there's just never, a time when this is not extremely important for all children and for all of us in the community and for our future. So thank you to our presenters. Join me in thanking them. And again, we'll be sending out a video from today's meeting to those on our mailing list. Please, again, take the time, if you do join and participate in Facebook, to join our Facebook group, and we'll be in touch through the summer and be ready to start back hopefully in person, but we're kind of reluctant to be too much in person because we've gained such statewide friends. So we'll figure that out. We have a few months to figure that out, but we do appreciate those of you who are with us today, and have a wonderful rest of the month. Go out and find out what you can about your candidates and make sure your vote counts. Thank you so much for being with us today. Enjoy the rest of your day.